Welcome to another episode of Coronacation, where culture, health and spirituality come together in the time of coronavirus. I'm Naomi White, I'm in Brisbane, Australia, and I am joined by Lisa Swanson in Hong Kong. How are you, Lisa?
I'm good, thank you.
Lisa, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've lived in Hong Kong now, nearly 20 years.
Wow.
So,
That.
I know we're going to talk about Corona, but that means actually because I've lived here 20 years, I've been through SARS as well, and a few more extra viruses, if that's possible. Before then, I lived in Africa for Kenya for a couple of years, and before that, Australia. And yeah, I'm originally from New Zealand, so I haven't lived in New Zealand for about 30 years, I'd say.
You are a true citizen of the world.
I don't know about that.
So tell me how coronavirus is impacting you. So you've referenced to the fact that you've lived through SARS. Obviously, this is broader reaching than that. But so how is this affecting you right now? Because Hong Kong's been through a lot lately.
Hong Kong has really been through a lot this last year. So not just for Corona, but we've had protests, major protests going on in Hong Kong about Hong Kong being taken over by China, basically, and that really was a big start to the whole year. That's been nearly a year that's been going on. Obviously, the protests have quietened down, and it's almost like everything's second to Corona now. Yeah. But Corona did obviously start a lot sooner in Hong Kong maybe than it did in the Western world. Well, certainly we cottoned onto it very fast. I think because of SARS, we've been through lots of situations where people need to learn to isolate from each other, and with the protest situation, we were not going out much anyway. Certainly not on the weekends, avoiding certain areas. We had already sort of conditioned ourselves to not going out as much as maybe what we would normally have done. And during SARS, obviously that happened. I found it quite interesting this time, because when I was here during SARS and being an expat, when SARS happened, everybody left, like immediately. It was a mass departure, not even thinking about it for 24 hours. It was just get on a plane and go. I was not one of those people. I decided, and I had young children then, or I had a young child. So I had a 3-year-old then. I was really worried about it. It did panic me quite a lot that my husband was working and, he was out in public and could possibly bring something home. But I did decide to stay. I can't remember really why, but it wasn't a bad decision. This time I did decide to leave straight away when things started to happen. I think it was more for a fact that I knew what was coming, and I hadn't had a break from Hong Kong for a while and that sort of thing. So I just made a decision to go. But it was nothing to do with being panicked about staying in Hong Kong. And I actually came back quite early, like before the whole world started to experience Corona, mainly because I was really worried about being trapped in my home country. I was in New Zealand. And I only had my son with me, and my daughter was here, and my husband was here, and I just didn't want us to be separated as a family. So I got back to Hong Kong, I think it was about mid-March. Earlier than that, maybe. No, early March. So before anything really started to happen worldwide with Corona. And obviously there wasn't a great deal of panic going on. I think at that time, certainly in Australia and New Zealand, and I flew through Australia to get to New Zealand. There were precautions being taken, but I was really interested to see that when I arrived in New Zealand, even though there was a lot of information about corona, they only wanted to know where I had just come from. They didn't actually realise that I had travelled from Hong Kong, and they never asked me that. I thought that was kind of interesting. I'm sure that wouldn't happen now. Yeah. I mean, it was an interesting experience in New Zealand because we were obviously well aware of what was going on back at home. We were already starting to be very careful, and I wanted to be very careful myself in New Zealand and distance myself from people just in case, but I was fairly certain that I didn't have anything and I wasn't carrying anything. The plane ride was quite scary though. There were a lot of extra precautions being taken. I don't think I've ever cleaned a plane so thoroughly myself. In Hong Kong itself, in terms of my experience here since I got back, it's been very up and down from a personal perspective. The downtimes are, I think it gets quite, you can fall into a little bit of a hole and feel a little bit, it's very easy to sleep in more. Both my children were doing online schooling. My daughter is doing university online schooling, and my son, who is autistic, does online schooling every day. He actually has quite a good timetable. Now we've got into that. That works really well. But there has been a lot of ups and downs in terms of everybody's temperaments, everybody being at home. There's a lot of food preparation going on. There's not much going out. My daughter has a boyfriend, so there was a bit of concern about interaction there. They were still interacting. They might not have been interacting with friends, but they both live in Hong Kong. So, obviously they were meeting each other, that sort of thing going on. My husband is a diabetic. That's a little bit of a concern because he's obviously one of the risk cases in terms of his age, his general health, the fact that he is a diabetic. But we pretty much stay at home all the time. I do a lot of cooking, a lot of cooking. And I don't mind that because I actually enjoy doing it, but I do find it quite stressful to try and keep up with everything, and it can be quite depressing, thinking, oh, here's another day I've got to get out of bed, housework, cook, all of that sort of thing, keep everybody motivated, make sure online schooling is happening for my son. We have lots of technical problems with that because he's autistic. There can be issues there.
Well, it sounds like you are the epicenter of that house. What do you do to keep yourself sane? Is there any advice you can give others? You've got a lot going on.
Well, I definitely had some down days, and very unlike me, I was getting, I was finding that I was sleeping in. I'm usually an early riser and early to bed person. I've noticed that I'm going to bed very late. I'm getting up very late. I find it quite depressing when I do that because if I get up too late, then I feel like I haven't got on top of the whole day. People are going to be looking for food, might need to go and do some grocery shopping, all of those sort of things, and a bit mundane and all of that sort of thing. So what I really noticed, the best thing for me has always been exercise, which I have tried to be doing some online exercise classes. Just taking myself out for a walk or a bit of a hike. The weather hasn't been very good. I'm not very good when weather's not, when weather's depressing, which I'm sure a lot of people are. Thankfully, we have a nice sunny day today, and that always lightens my mood. Just getting up having a shower and doing my hair and putting some makeup on always makes a difference for me. And the minute I start doing that, then I feel a little bit more like myself, and then I feel like I can just get on with the day. I might not put all my jewels and nice clothes on, but it makes me feel better. So I do, if I am going to the supermarket, I might do that because it just makes me feel better. But that's what makes me feel better. And then once I've sort of felt like I've got on top of the day and I've done more cooking, or maybe I've done an exercise class or that sort of thing, and my house is clean, I'm not a very good person coping when there's lots of mess around me and everything's dirty and everybody in the household doesn't really see it and there's lots of washing to do, those sort of things. I find it quite depressing. So really just try and keep on top of everything. But for me, having a shower, trying to keep a routine going, putting on some makeup, getting out, maybe doing a little bit of exercise, all of those things. I'm really lucky in the place that we live in now because we have a garden. It's very unusual in Hong Kong to have a garden. So that's one of the things I really enjoy doing. So even if I don't get outside the house, it's a good time of year to be pruning. So I do lots of pruning and water my garden, and that just it puts me in a good mood.
So routine, get you out in nature and being mindful of sort of how you show up every day, you know, in terms of appearance. And yeah, Lisa, that's fantastic advice. You've been through a lot and you've got a really interesting story. Thank you so much for talking to Coronation, and have an amazing day.
I look forward to hearing about everybody else's experiences too.
I know it's a big melting pot at the moment, but there's a lot of same for everybody in all of it. Thanks so much, Lisa. Talk soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.